Good afternoon, everyone. Very warm welcome to the Third Sector Employability Forum webinar, organised in conjunction with SCVO. My name is Grant Alexander from the Link Group, and I'm also chair of the Third Sector Employability Forum, and delighted to be with you to chair today's proceedings. We have a full programme for you, full of expert speakers, also have a range of delegates. There are 135 of you from across the sector on this call. And beyond attending today, I suppose it confirms what I suspect we all know: the need for employability, that's high quality employability provision, has never been more important than it is right now. As we emerge from the pandemic and deal with the economic impact it has had on our people and on our communities. So the timing for the session such as this is right, and the need for a session such as this has never been greater. The focus for today will be on No One Left Behind, as you would expect, and the progress being made with implementation from a national and local perspective. Future commissioning processes through the Scotland Excel Employability Framework, and we'll also hear about ways in which the third sector can engage, which I suspect is why most of you are here. The tone for the day is informal and participative. It's your webinar, so I would encourage you to get involved, make comments and ask questions via the online chat facility or the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens. Please pop your questions into the chat as they occur throughout the session, as we factored in some time at the end of the session to pick up on these. So please involve yourself. To let you know, we're recording the session, although not the chat, and this will be available to view online through the SCVO website after the event for those people who could not attend today's session, because I know there are quite a few people who had hoped to be here. We'll also share the speakers' slides. So we have 4 speakers for you today, all of whom will bring their own different perspectives to the rollout of No One Left Behind. We'll hear the Scottish Government perspective, followed by that of a third sector interface, then the view through the lens of a LEP. Finally, we'll hear from Scotland Excel, who will update on the new commissioning framework. So we have a pretty full session for you. Before moving on to our speakers, here's your first opportunity to get involved. And to talk you through this, I'd like to hand you over to my colleague, Lorna Forrest from SCVO and fellow member of the TSEF executive. Lorna.
Thank you, Grant. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming along today. Packed agenda, as Grant says. But first of all, before we hear from our speakers, we thought we would launch a couple of polls to get some feedback and views from yourselves. So is this by magic? Thank you, Helen. The first poll is a bit about where we are now. Where's the sector now? And a bit of, it's not to test your knowledge in any way, it's just to try and understand the level of knowledge of future local employability provision happening as part of No One Left Behind. So you can just choose one answer for this one, from excellent to none. Tell us how you would rate your knowledge of future local employability provision as part of No One Left Behind. I'll just give it another 10 seconds or so. Got over 80% participated so far. And if I could ask Helen to share the results. So excellent. So we've got a varied response there from people. Nobody sadly saying excellent, although I don't know if there's anyone that could actually say they have an excellent knowledge. There's a lot going on now. There's a lot of change coming. So it is quite difficult to keep on top of everything that's happening in the landscape just now. Most people are saying a fair understanding or minimal or good. Let's hope today's session will increase that understanding, and TSEF as an executive will do our very best to support in any gap areas. Which brings me on to the next poll, which is about asking you what you need now. So where are the gaps in your knowledge? Where could we assist in providing more information? So Helen, if I could ask you to move on to the second poll, please. So this is asking, what's the biggest gaps in your knowledge? Which areas do you think you feel you need more information on? And you can answer as many as you wish, I think, in this one, multiple choice. There are 10 possible answers here, so you may need to scroll down to get the full 10. Have a look and select which ones you would like more information on. Oh, I think it might be that it's saying single choice only in the poll. Okay, there's responses coming in. Let's get a feel for what people's top answer would be then. 77% participated so far. Leave it a couple more minutes, seconds even. Okay, we'll pop the results up. So most people are saying that future commissioning processes and third sector opportunities is the top answer there. I'm sure many of you would have selected other ones as well if it was multiple choice, but there is a range of answers there. A popular one around what will replace national programmes. This seems to be a key question that's been asked by the sector. How no one left behind will be measured and monitored. Collaboration opportunities and ways to engage, also critical. And I'm pretty sure all, if not some of our speakers today, will talk about some of those ways to engage. Okay, thank you very much, Helen. We could take the polls down now if that's okay, and I'll hand back to Grant. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorna. Some interesting, if not entirely unsurprising results there. So thanks to everyone for sharing your thoughts and helping us to set the scene. So just a quick reminder, if through our speakers' input there are questions that occur to you, please use the Q&A and chat functions at the bottom of your screen, and we'll pick up on those later in the session. So without further ado, that takes us nicely to our first speaker of the afternoon. So I'd like to welcome Chris O'Hanlon from Scottish Government. Chris.
Thanks, Grant. I'm just going to share my screen. And hopefully everyone should be able to see a set of slides. Yep. So as Grant said, my name's Chris O'Hanlon. I'm from the Design and Measurement team in Scottish Government's Employability division. I'm really happy for the slides to go out after, so don't worry about kind of taking notes or jotting anything down. But for anyone who does want to find out a little bit more, I do have my email address on the slides, so do feel free to get in touch after today's session. So I understand the main focus of today is getting into discussions around the kind of local context. So Lorna asked me to provide a very brief overview of some of the work at a national level. So just to kick us off, I always use this slide because it conveys the key messaging around no one left behind and the work that's currently taking place at a national level. And that's the need to balance national coherence with local flexibility. So by national coherence, we don't mean uniformity of services and that everyone delivers everything in the same way, but rather that expectations of services and what users can expect is the same whether you're coming from Shetland or Borders. The local flexibility point is also really important. So this isn't a programme or a service designed by Scottish Government nationally. It's designed in partnership at the local level. When we're talking about no one left behind at the national level, a lot of what you might have heard and a lot of our own thinking is around national products or frameworks that we can put in place to create the conditions for good services at a local level. And when I say good services, I've borrowed the definition from Lou Down, who was a senior service designer in the UK government in a past life. But what they say in terms of good services is that services are good for the user, which I think we would all understand as it can actually help the service user, the client, the person accessing services to achieve what it is they want to achieve. In our case, that's usually find a job or find work. But in addition to this, it also needs to be good for the organisations delivering them. So that means it's not overly burdensome, for example, to go through reporting or data collection, and that the data that we collect is actually useful for everyone across the employability system. And we also think about good for society. So it's not just about getting somebody into any job as soon as possible, but it's thinking about the role employability can play in achieving good work for people, fair work, as well as tackling some of the wider social problems that we currently face, whether that be child poverty or any number of kind of large social issues that employability has a key role to play in tackling. So at a national level, I've mentioned the national products to create conditions. And the reason we're developing these products is as a result of conversations we had with partners, stakeholders and providers across Scotland. So we asked people essentially what worked well at the moment and where they thought the challenges were. And a lot of what we heard has probably resonated in some discussions within third sector, but there was a lot of discussion around how complex the current landscape is, and that it can be really difficult to make sense of that landscape, whether you're a service user or whether you're someone trying to provide services at a local level. We also heard really strongly that we need to achieve local flexibility alongside national coherence, and actually those two are critical to actually delivering the policy intent behind No One Left Behind. We also heard that national policy or concepts like person-centred services can lead to different interpretations if expectations and definitions are unclear. So the products that I'm about to kind of quickly take you through today, don't only just set the national framework up, but they also seek to make clear what we mean by things like person-centred services and what that will look like within No One Left Behind. So as I said, I will send this out. Hopefully this is clear, but this is a map of how all the products that we're currently working on in partnership with the colleagues in the third sector, wider public sector and private sector fit together. So at the very highest level up the top, you can see the problem statement that I've just kind of talked us through. So it's just setting out really succinctly what it is we're looking to tackle with the creation of these products. Within my own work, I'm responsible for the delivery of the shared measurement framework, customer charter and the service standards. So what these products set out to do is establish a high level expectation across the country. And there are very strong links between these. And users have been really central to helping us create these products. So the customer charter, for example, was co-designed directly with users through a lived experience panel. And the insight that users fed into that work has been used to shape thinking around the shared measurement framework and the service standards. But what these three products do is allow us to link some of our overarching commitments to continuous improvement and embedding the Scottish approach to service design into the expectations at a high level. But we've also recognised that there is still some knowledge gaps, particularly around the Scottish approach to service design, because these are relatively new concepts at a national level. So what we're also looking to do is create a number of supporting products that are put in place primarily to help people who maybe don't have maturity of understanding around service design approaches or continuous improvement to implement some of these tools in their practice. That isn't to say that these should have to be adopted by everyone. They very much have been set up as supporting products. So where services, providers and partners already have really strong continuous improvement or service design practices in place, we envisage these continuing as they are. This isn't about ripping up everything that's currently happening and starting from scratch. It's about trying to recognise good practice while providing the support that others may need to get to that point. We've also got a number of separate products that sit underneath that, and these are specific products to support local infrastructure at a local employability partnership level. So depending on your role and your main focus, how you view these products and how they all fit together might differ ever so slightly. So for example, if you're really focused on national commissioning or commissioning work, the National Commissioning Framework may be the most important product for you out of this suite of frameworks. But fundamentally, the way that they're set out here is one way of cutting the cake based on my own work and the service design and shared measurement framework work streams. But hopefully you can see that there's a clear distinction there between expectations and setting those at a national level, alongside more focused and specific products to help support parts of activity on the ground, whether that is local employability partnership framework refresh, whether it's the ERI framework, or whether it's the operational plan or LEP data toolkit that are currently being considered and developed with partners. As we flick through, as you flick through the slides, you'll be able to see these in a little bit more detail. So, for example, when we're talking about things like the shared measurement framework, it's not just about achieving a single purpose, but rather it's about ensuring that a lot of the commitments and the principles of No One Left Behind are threaded throughout all of this. So the shared measurement framework, taken as an example, isn't just about refining reported data, but it's about driving the use of that data to inform continuous improvement activity and to make sure that the data that we ask for and that we collectively gather is useful at every level, whether that's for national statistic publications or whether it's for driving improvement activity in a local service provider. Again, with the other products, as I said, depending on your particular role, how you view these might differ ever so slightly. But the most important thing that I just want to end on is that we're working to ensure alignment between all of these products from top to bottom. So it's not about setting up, a number of different expectations through a number of different programs or products. It's about ensuring consistency across the board, and that where additional support might be needed, there's a product in place to help with that. So I was only given 5 minutes. I've stuck to time almost exactly, but I will be around for the rest of today's session. So looking forward to the Q&A, and I'll keep an eye on the chat bar as well. Thanks, Grant.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. Thank you for that. Yeah, as Chris said, he will be around. So please, if you have any questions for him, use the chat function or the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens. Yeah, so very much national perspective there. And as Chris said, those products, the intention is to provide this natural coherence, but with local flexibility. They're not intended to be prescriptive. So with that in mind, if we can maybe move to the local now, and our next speaker is Michelle Thompson from Voluntary Action in North Lanarkshire. VANL is the local third sector interface. So Michelle will give us a view from that particular area as to what's happening there. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Grant. Can everybody hear me okay? I hope so. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity for coming along today to speak to you. So I'd like to talk to you about the North Lanarkshire Community and Voluntary Sector Employability Network and employability involvement with Voluntary Action North Lanarkshire. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So, as Grant said, my name is Michelle Thompson. I'm a Senior Development Officer with VANL. In addition to that, I'm also the coordinator of the North Lanarkshire Community and Voluntary Sector Employability Network. And from now on, I'll just call that Employability Network. So if I can have the next slide, please. I wanted to give you a little bit of a history about the network. I've been involved with it for at least 13 years, and it existed before I was involved with it. So it's a well-established network, and it has a terms of reference. We have a chair, a coordinator. I thought it was important to say that it's non-funded. It's something that VANL provides support in terms of my time in coordinating that. So I have a development officer role, but I also involved with this network. We have a chair of the network, which is from a sector organisation, and for quite some time it was Roots to Work Limited, and it is now Enable that has that role. As I say, it's supported by VANL in different ways. I coordinate the network, but we also support it with sharing information out to the sector by bulletins, e-alerts, that sort of thing. So we do a couple of different roles with that. We currently have about 43 organisations as part of the network, and it has been a fairly steady membership. Sometimes we have organisations come off, and then we have some new ones come on, but that has been fairly steady at that number. We have quarterly network meetings, which are well attended, and some of the people that attend the network have been attending it for as long as I've been involved with the network. So it is, as I say, a well established and respected network in North Lanarkshire. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the network is to bring the sector together. It's about sharing information on local and national developments, identify good practice in employability and service delivery, identify opportunities for partnership working. It provides peer support. identifies good practice, and relevant issues can be fed up to the North Lanarkshire Partnership Board via the CVS PG. And we're quite keen that it remains a vibrant, effective and sustainable network, which makes a valued contribution to the work of the sector locally. And I think when these terms were written some time ago, but they're looked at and reviewed annually to make sure they're still fit for purpose. And just looking at some of the points here, it's probably even more relevant in the current climate with the changes that are happening. So can I have the next slide, please? So responsibilities of the network, it's a collective voice for the sector on employability issues, and that is one of the things that is very, very relevant at the moment. We can, and we have done, developed a collective response to current and emerging policy developments, secure a fuller understanding of employability contribution made by the sector, because I think there's still a lot of people don't realise that the sector is involved in this and that it's a huge contributor in terms of employability, and develop successful partnership working with statutory organisations with, sorry, there's a comment, I can't see my slide. Need to wait till that goes away. There we go. Develop successful partnerships working with statutory organisations with the aim of providing a better service to the citizens in North Lanarkshire. And when I was saying the members of the network, part of that we have the sector, we have DWP, we have North Lanarkshire Council, we have NHS. So we have some statutory partners attend there also. Can I have the next slide, please? So Van L's role in employability, and again, I wanted to touch on some things we've been involved in the past. So Van L doesn't deliver employability, we support and represent those that do. So in the past, we were involved in Future Jobs Fund. I'm sure many of you will remember that. That was about 2010-11 time. We had a very successful partnership, which included Van L, DWP, North Lanarkshire Council and Routes to Work. And at the time, there was 1,100 jobs for North Lanarkshire. And when it first started, the sector, I think, were allocated about 1/3 to 2/3 to the local authority. And by the end of that, and based on the successful partnership, the sector ended up with half of those, with approximately 550 posts. And what we did in North Lanarkshire at that time was there was a dedicated member of staff at what was the CVS at the time, and that was me, that only worked on that one role to support organisations. And at the time, DWP recognised that having that support there had an impact on the increased number of roles that were created in the sector. So we did that. Following on from that, there was a private investment in North Lanarkshire, and the stipulation was that it had to benefit residents of the Airdrie area. And Wellwind Employment Initiative came from that, which you could call a mini Future Jobs Fund. So Van L administered that. That was for 13 posts at the time, and we wrote the programme for that and sort of based it on Future Jobs Fund. So we used that experience from that and assisted with that initiative. As I say, we support, promote and represent the network as well as the sector at other networks and other events. We share updates with the sector in the way of emails, bulletins and social media. And some of those updates include job vacancies, everything to do with changes in employability, any programmes that any of the members are running, and we share national and local updates too. And obviously we're part of the North Lanarkshire Local Employability Partnership, which is, I think, having the history of the network and involvement for the length of time we had, and the connections with many of the other LEP members has allowed us to join the LEP and be informed with a lot of local activity. And the Employability Network is an ideal vehicle and partnership way for people to engage with the sector and for the sector to engage with others. So that has given us the knowledge to be involved with the LEP. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have also been involved with Kickstart. When that was announced, we wanted to see what was happening locally, and we partnered with Roots to Work, who were the local gateway organisation. So we promoted Kickstart to the sector. We facilitated an event with Roots to Work speaking at that. Organisations came to us and we forwarded the details on to Roots to Work, where they worked with them on Kickstart. So we've done that too. Young Persons Guarantee, we are delivering the North Lanarkshire Youth Volunteering Project of that in North Lanarkshire. Next slide, please. So in terms of the localism agenda for VANEL, the main agenda for VANEL is the local approach to employability will support a cross-sector strategic coordinated approach to investment, learning and improvement in employability support at a local level, with the sector valued as a key strategic player and receiving funding based on the quality of its services, outcomes and value for money. We'll also continue to support and work with organisations in the sector through the Employability Network and to participate in the North Lanarkshire LEP to advance this agenda. And just to touch another thing on the LEP, in North Lanarkshire, we have decided to take a grant process for the LEP, and there are two subgroups from that. One deciding and looking at what will be funded, and the other subgroup looking at the actual grants process itself. And VANEL is on both of those subgroups to make sure that you know, the voice of the sector is represented at those two subgroups. So next slide, please. So the sector will gain from a local agenda. So it's a specific local priorities can be addressed more easily. Local people can make decisions using local knowledge. There's a good cross-sector relationships that are already established, which will benefit the process. And VANEL maintains an impartial position to represent the sector and remain committed to ensuring that all eligible delivery organisations are encouraged to apply for LEP funding where appropriate. And VANEL will continue to support and champion employability across the sector. And as I say, I've been involved with this for many, many years, and will continue to represent the sector in as many ways as possible. So next slide, please. Okay, so it's just left for me to say thank you, and I will see everyone at the Q&A session. Thank you.
That's great, Michelle. Thank you very much. That was a good sort of comprehensive run through of what's happening up in North Lanarkshire. Yeah, it's clear to see you mentioned vibrant, effective and sustainable network, and it's clear that yes, it's very well established in your neck of the woods there. That said, you have to remain fleet of foot to adapt to the new initiatives that are around and will continue to be around over the months and years to come, and to be able to respond to the new demands getting put on it. So clearly, you are one of 32, Michelle, in your area there. There will be different structures, different setups, different approaches in place elsewhere. Maybe encourage you all on the call to familiarise yourself with what's happening locally in your own area, with a view to influencing and being involved in the shape that takes locally. So yeah, very interesting. So Thank you very much for that, Michelle. So moving on, we can move to our next speaker now, who is Ruth Cooper. Ruth will be speaking from a LEP perspective. Ruth's from Renfrewshire LEP. Again, we're recognising one of 32, but keen to hear what's happening over in Renfrewshire. So Ruth, over to you. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much, and thanks for inviting me to the webinar today. I'll just share my screen first of all and tell you a bit more about the Renfrewshire LEP and what we've been doing for the last period of time since No One Left Behind has been launched. Sorry, I'm just trying to, hope everyone can see that. So basically, I'm the Economic Development Manager at Renfrewshire Council, but I also chair the LEP, and I've basically had that role within the council for about 10 years, so I'm well versed in employability. And probably just to say, we always had quite a good employability partnership in Renfrewshire, but it did change quite substantially after No One Left Behind was launched in 2018. And there was also a partnership agreement for employability between Scottish Government and local government. And it was quite clear from both of them that there was going to be a really different role at a local level for the LEPs and much more local decision making and co-commissioning, etc., which was something that we hadn't really done before. So it was quite clear that there was going to be a lot of change there. And so because of that, we knew that there would also have to be changes to the LEP and to the LEP structure. And what we did initially from 2018-19 was to make sure that we broadened the membership of the LEP to include all of the key themes that were mentioned as part of the integration process for No One Left Behind. So we had more representation from health and social care, for justice and from housing. There was a new terms of reference for the LEP. And as part of the relationship with local government, it was suggested that the chair of the LEP in the first instance should be the councils. So our chair previously, we had a rotational chair actually, but at that point in time it was Skills Development Scotland, and as the council representative I took over there in 2019. And really what we wanted to do was to make sure that we were much more focused on partnership, because I think prior to that it had been much more about information sharing and making sure we knew what each other were doing, and it was all very cosy, and you know, it was always a good relationship in Renfrewshire. But we knew that because of No One Left Behind, we really had to take the whole partnership working much more seriously. And one of the things, for example, that we did, we I think for about the last 10 years have organised quite a big conference in the area for all partners to get involved in. So we would have a big employability event once a year. It would be free of charge. It would be open to as many people that wanted to come who were working in the area as possible. And in terms of No One Left Behind, we moved that then from 2019 to be 2 a year, to make sure that we had that involvement from as many partners as possible at the local level and could get their input into the plans for the area. I should say that on the LEP, it's Engage Renfrewshire, who's the third sector interface for Renfrewshire, who sit on the LEP. But as I talk you through the structure, you'll see that there are lots of other groups and opportunities for anyone else to get involved. So I talked about the conferences that we ran. So this is just the front sheet for the conference in 2019. And you'll see that since then, all the conferences have No One Left Behind as the key focus. So that was about inclusive growth in 2019. That was the most recent one that we held, which was about economic recovery. And you'll see again, the title is No One Left Behind in Renfrewshire. The pictures represent how we used to run things, but of course we're all online now, so it's not like that anymore. But we still had 184 people at the event in June, and that was all local people working in the area on employability or working with key target groups. And one of the things we did back in 2019 when No One Left Behind was becoming you know, a real key focus for us, was to ask everybody in the area through the conferences, who is left behind in Renfrewshire, and how do we work through who the target group should be for No One Left Behind that would then become the focus for the next few years. So what kind of local services do we have? And do we know the numbers where we're maybe well underrepresented, and do we know where there's unmet demand? And really the plan there was to create a No One Left Behind plan to look at where future resources would be most needed and most benefit our area. And so from that, and this wasn't just the LEP, this was through the conference activity, like I say, with hundreds literally of people getting involved. These were the groups that were considered to be the most in need and the most left behind within Renfrewshire. And I don't think there'll be a lot of surprise there. I would imagine if most areas did this, then they would have very similar focus for the groups that we needed to target. And so what we decided to do was to form subgroups of the LEP, where we would look at each of those thematic groups in turn and identify the scale of the issue that was there, what the stats tell us, what kind of services are there, and why people are not engaging and what is wrong with, or maybe not is wrong, but why are they not engaging? Is there something that we need to do to change the service? Is it about the targeting and the focus? So the second element of that was how successful are our current services? Why are people underrepresented? Is there anything else that we can do? Are there other areas in Scotland where we could learn some good practice from? And this was really to help us to produce an action plan linked to No One Left Behind and the funding streams that would come online in the future years. And the key things that came out of that piece of work was that while we had quite good representation in some areas, we also did need to be much more targeted on priority people and groups. And I think a lot of the services are very good at being responsive to inquiries and to people coming through the door. But what we recognised was that we actually had to go out on a much more targeted basis and find people and go to places where they were maybe not thinking about employability, they were maybe talking about housing issues, and to make sure that we had a service that was there that could pick these people up at the right time. We found also that tracking and monitoring of that was really essential, that we did need to work in partnership, and that one service in isolation didn't work. And for my own service, economic development, our service worked particularly well with health and education, and we kind of formed a wee sort of subgroup there who did a lot of work together. So it was really key that integration and alignment with other services had to happen. And we did do a range of, as Chris was mentioning, bringing clients in and talking to people locally about what they wanted and why they didn't engage. And our intention, and I can't say that we're doing this across the board at the moment, but we're well on the way to it, is to put people with experience of certain things at the centre of the design process and to involve them a lot more. And the other thing we found is that the services might be great and they might be right, but they were in the wrong place, and we had to bring them much closer to the people that we were particularly trying to target. This is our LEP structure. It's not the same in all areas, and as you'll see, it's quite complex. So as well as having the local employability partnership, we have all of these different subgroups that look at the key themes. The LEP meets 6 times a year, and the subgroups meet quarterly. And they focus on the particular needs of individual groups and what kind of service they're getting and whether we're missing anything. And these groups are providing the information to us for how we would commission services in the future. We also have the kind of big grey box. I'm sure you probably can't read it very well, but we also have a providers forum, which meets quarterly, and that's open to any employability provider in the area. And that's a kind of sharing of information and referrals and how we work together, and a general kind of catch up for a lot of people about what's going on and how they can get involved. But part of the process for us was also about how we would in future co-commission. And what we realised and what we picked up from the conference, particularly the one earlier this year, was that we didn't actually have a forum for the organisation's staff who would bid for contracts or who would be the managers of, deciding whether contracts would be bid for. So as well as the delivery forum, the little orange box at the bottom, we decided to have a Contractors Forum. That was a group that we would talk to about what the future delivery options might be, what they would require from us as a LEP in terms of how could we make this a bit more straightforward and easy for them, recognising that there was a big shift in everybody's information and everybody's reliance on the types of funding that we had before. So this group we talked to a few times and made sure that when we were looking at different options for co-commissioning, that their thoughts and experiences were taken on board. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what we did then. This is the work of our LEP at the moment. There's lots of stuff that they're doing locally in terms of how we write our improvement plan, how we look at the demand in the area, how we're going to monitor performance. But the bit I'm just going to focus on, because I think it's more interesting from yourselves, is the co-commissioning part of it. So co-commissioning is part of a framework that the Scottish Government are making sure that everyone is going to be involved with. So it's really keen that we co-commission. I'm not going to speak in too much about the rest of this, but there is a lot of work going on within the LEP to make sure that we get it right. But what we did in Renfrewshire was we were aware that there were different pots of money with the stopping of Employability Fund and the decision that No One Left Behind would replace that. We spoke to these contractors and different providers who were used to getting a range of funding in different ways. And there was clearly a lot of concern there. And I think there was a lot of anxiety about the dates and when it would all happen. So to try and preempt and to be ahead of the game, so to speak, in our area, because we didn't want any gaps in service delivery either. And we know how important a lot of those providers are to making sure that there are opportunities for people in our area. We decided and actually did it all very, very quickly. I think we decided it in the end of August, and by the 1st of October we had a new employability grant programme launched. And this was instead of doing a co-commissioned procurement process, because that process takes too long for what we wanted to do. And so we put out an employability grant programme locally. We aren't aware yet of how much money the area is going to get for next year, but the council opted to front load the amount of money we think it is, plus add in some money from our own budgets as well. So we got 34 applications submitted, and it was a programme that would run basically from the 1st of November this year to March 23. We approved 24 projects, and 51% of them, or the value of them, sorry, £1.68 million we approved, and 51% of them is going to the third sector. We've done that basically, as I say, to make sure that we are a bit ahead of the game. For next year, we will continue to look at procuring small contracts. At the moment, anything under 10,000, we try and give to as many local third sector partners as possible. They're quite often the smaller organisations who aren't ready to bid for the bigger contracts yet. So we do quite a lot of that just to build local organisations up. We're aiming to procure some larger contracts through the national framework when it's ready, and I know Scotland Excel are going to talk about that. And we think there might be another round for the employability grant programme. But at the moment we have a really significant amount which is going through the grants process, and that's all getting finalised just now. So that was quite a positive way forward for us. And at a local level, a lot of the organisations were very grateful for the fact that we had effectively put our money where our mouth was and taken the risk and said we will front load the money to make sure that there is a lot of provision in place. And we will look at any other gaps that we need to look at for next year, because I think we all know that it's a very changing environment, changing economy just now, and we may require different things to be in place. The other thing that we're talking about locally, obviously we have the long-term unemployed programme, which is aimed at the third sector and the public sector. And we also have a employer recruitment incentive programme that any sector can get involved in. But for our third sector, we had a local event recently, I think about 5 weeks ago, with 24 local organisations. And in terms of the LTU programme, I think we already have around 8 applications approved and getting recruited for just now for the LTU programme, with another 10 places which are in discussion because they're struggling on the accredited training part of it. So I think just to finish up, conscious of time, in Renfrewshire, I think there's lots of opportunity for providers to get involved. And if you are in Renfrewshire and not aware of some of that, please just give me a shout after, because there's lots of different groups, there's lots of forums, and hopefully I think I've seen some names of those who are here today who are already involved in it, so we can maybe say a little bit more about you know, how it works in Renfrewshire. But I do appreciate it's different in every other area. I think that is more or less my time up and the end of my slides, so happy to take any questions at a later stage. Thanks very much.
Great, Ruth. Thank you very much. Yeah, lots in there, lots going on in your own LEP there. So some very impressive reading, actually. Particularly picked up on the engagement, your providers forum. I think that's essential there. I think we're all recognising no one left behind. It's a collective effort. So I'm really pleased to see you've opened up and are involving local providers in that conversation. Also the co-commissioning, again, hopefully remove some of the uncertainty, because there are lots of uncertainties around in terms of timescales and funding allocations and the like. So it's clear you have a clear process and timescales that you're working to over in Renfrewshire. So again, that's to be welcomed and applauded. So again, I'm sure there's a lot to be learnt from that. And again, for those on the call, I would encourage you to post any questions that you have for Ruth into the Q&A, and we will certainly pick up on those. I'm certainly finding speakers really informative today. Hopefully you are as well. If you're finding this session of use, there's actually a further SCVO webinar taking place next week, next Thursday, a week today. You might want to consider signing up for it. It's employability related, albeit on a different subject. It's the impact of the voluntary sector in creating employment. And as I say, that's on next Thursday, and registration details will be posted in the chat for that one. So we've kept to time. I'm saying we, our speakers have kept to time, so thanks to them for that. Our final speaker this afternoon will provide yet another perspective on how No One Left Behind could be administered at local level. And for this, I'd like to hand over to Zoe Brown from Scotland Excel. Thanks, Zoe.
Hi, afternoon everybody. Thank you for having me here today. My name's Zoe Braun. I'm Category Manager at Scotland Excel. I'm here to give a brief overview of who Scotland Excel are and our role within this. Next slide, please. Thank you. So who are Scotland Excel? We are the Centre of Procurement Expertise for Local Government in Scotland. We were established in 2008 and we work with all 32 local authorities over a number of different areas. We have a range of contracts and procurement solutions across a number of different categories, and that includes construction, social care and corporate supplies and services, so that's things like food and PPE. We also work with a range of stakeholders on different projects to ensure that outcomes are met and delivered, and we've been commissioned by the Improvement Service and Scottish Government to undertake the national procurement approach for employability services in light of the policy changes and direction. If you can move on, please. Thank you. In terms of the work to date, we've held user intelligence meetings or UIG meetings with councils and other stakeholders, including the Improvement Service and Scottish Government, to understand what is being done currently locally and to use this to develop the strategy for the national approach. We've also attended the stakeholder advisory group meetings and given input where that's been required. And finally, we recently published a prior information notice or PIN notice and survey to providers. If you can move on, please. So in terms of the timeline for this project, this highlights the timeline to date and it also provides the planned publish date of January 2022, which was included within the PIN notice. And I'll just chat a little bit more about that. You can move on. Thank you. In terms of the PIN survey, I just wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you to those on the call today that had responded to the PIN notice and completed the survey. The information and opinions that were included in responses were very rich in detail and gave real insight into the current provision, along with the risks and issues. So just a thank you for doing that. And we are planning to engage with the market further, although this is likely to be into 2022 now, and providers will be notified about that in due course. If you can move on, please. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the procurement journey and the different things that can affect this. So if you move on to the next slide, this graphic is from the Procurement Journey, which is an online resource from Scottish Government. And it sets out the kind of key areas of consideration for procurement. And there's some further considerations that I'll just chat through just now. So firstly, the kind of value of procurement. The value dictates the overall process that must be followed under Scottish regulations. However, there are some distinctions. So one of them is the light touch regime, which is for kind of people-focused services. And that includes social care services, which is the area that I work in. And it allows it sets out a specific kind of set of rules and guidance around contracting for certain social and other specific services. So it sets out a more flexible and compliant route to market, which is relevant for this type of service and should enable the outcomes required for local authorities and providers to be met. And the requirement of this process are lighter than other procedures set out in the regulations. And it's quite likely that employability services falls within that remit, and therefore we're able to create a process that meets the needs of people accessing the services. In terms of the overall timeframe and the project timescales, they are quite tight. So like I said, the next stage is the sort of publishing of anything would be in 2022, but early in that year. And in terms of the focus is very much around the kind of alignment with the national policy direction, but also making it flexible to meet local requirements. And I know that there might be some considerations around local arrangements and national procurement. So often we have framework agreements and they might sit alongside local commissioning or procurement contracts. And this can be for a number of different
Seem to have lost sound for the moment. Sorry, Zoe, I can see you and I just can't hear you. I think it's happening for a few of us. Do you want to try muting and unmuting again, Zoe? Sorry, Zoe, I'm just going to jump in again. There seems to be a bit of an audio issue.
I guess the gremlins.
Do you want to try speaking again, Zoe? No, that's strange. We can hear Grant, but not yourself, strangely.
Right, well, that's a shame because hopefully we can pick up on Zoe again. Seems a shame moving to questions before you finish the presentation. I don't know if our technical experts behind the scenes can work with Zoe to see whether we can get reconnected or not. But yeah, I mean, there's interesting stuff in there as well. So in the meantime, I think the intention after Zoe's input was to move to questions. So I would suggest we'll maybe do that now. In fact, ahead of that, I've been told that our technical people have picked up on the earlier poll as well, where I think people were only given the opportunity to vote on one of the things. It was the second poll question. You're only given the option to pick one answer. Apparently, you can select more than one now. So, can I ask, and maybe on the back of having heard some of the information from the speakers as well, it'll be interesting to see whether there's any change to this. But it's a multiple choice question, which asks, what are the biggest gaps in your knowledge and which areas do you feel you need more information on? Again, could I ask you maybe just to vote on this and see where that takes us? Okay, could we bring up the responses there to see how that looks? Right, slight movement, I think, from before, recognising obviously more people are voting in more categories now because you can. But yeah, the future commissioning process remains well out front at the top there. But I think slight movement in a couple of them down below. So yeah, it's all there to be worked on. Okay, I'm assuming we've not got Zoe back with us, so can we maybe move to questions now? Yeah, I see a number of you have been busy posting questions, which is great. At the end of the day, it's your session, and we're keen to hear from you, keen that you're involved. So looking at the Q&As, the first question I think was addressed to you, Chris. Is it planned to use a shared measurement framework to drive improvement in phase 3 of No One Left Behind delivery from April 2023?
Thanks, Grant. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. So yes, the purpose is to drive improvement as early as possible. So you'll be aware that within the Scottish approach to employability and national policy, continuous improvement is a key part of that. Obviously, an important driver of continuous improvement is having availability of data and be able to use that data to drive improvement. So the plan will be for that to happen at the earliest opportunity. And that will also need to happen at a number of different levels. So when we talk about driving continuous improvement, we don't necessarily just mean at a service level. I'm also really keen to make sure that the products are discussed at the national level are improved as we go as well. So feedback and insight and data will be a really important tool for that as well.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Hopefully that's answered your question, Stuart. Next question is from an anonymous attendee. We know who you are. For Lorna, curious to know if similar networks exist in every other local authority area, whether participants on the call attend them. So given where this sits in the Q&As, I suspect this was the TSI that was being referred to there. So I don't know if you want to pick up on that one, Michelle.
I'm not 100% sure about other areas. I do know that other people have asked me if there are other networks in their area because they don't believe there are. So I think it is. I've seen some comments that other areas do have networks. So I think there are, and I think they're all different. But maybe going forward, this will be something that organisations, other TSIs want to get involved in. And part of what I was trying to say in the presentation is that it is something you can do, and it should be something that is funded, but Vanel utilised some of my time to support that network. But going forward with TSIs being represented at LEPs and you know, you don't know how things are going to develop and the amount of work that's going to be involved in that. Maybe that's something that should be looked at, that the TSIs are funded to deliver some sort of network. I'm not sure, but so I don't know. I think it's more unusual than usual, but happy to be corrected with anyone here that can keep us right. So I don't know if that's answered the question, but I don't think there are too many of them.
Okay, Michelle, thanks for that. Lorna, do you have any insight into that at all from your SCVO perspective?
It was actually me that asked the question, Grant, and it was popped into the question box because I was just curious. I am aware of quite a few, and there were some responses posted in the chat. So it was just really to give some local insight to others on the chat in case they did exist and people weren't aware of them. There is the TSI network website, which I'm guessing people could go to and contact their individual TSIs to find out a bit more. And likewise, I popped in the chat a link to the local employability leads as well. I think Louise and Pegs also have a response they could give.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I know for a fact Pegs would have, given a particular position over in Fife. Pegs, do you want to come in?
There we go. I'll try and lower my hand as well. There we go. Hi, everybody. I think in Fife, we are funded to do, I popped that into the chat, I think, at some point, but we are funded. It's only, you know, I keep saying this to everybody, it's not a lot of money. Our original budget was only 35 grand a year for what turns out to be quite an amazing bang for their buck, I think, as far as the local employability partnership is concerned. And that's now expanded because we've taken on more of a role in some of the co-commissioning work that that Ruth was mentioning, them looking at in Renfrewshire, and we've kind of, because of our connection with sort of some of the more community-based organisations, have been able to take a lead on that, slightly independent from the local authority, which I think has helped with that role. So yeah, but there's not that many. Yeah, there's the Joined Up for Jobs Forum actually in Edinburgh that I modelled the work we ended up doing in Fife when I first started in my post. So definite credit to them. And I think Cherie, who's now got a post in Dumfries and Galloway, is also funded through that LEP. But they're, I think so far in terms of TSI independently funded reps, we're relatively few and far between. But it's such a massive arena. I think it's a really big ask of TSIs to expect them to be able to do that within the existing resource that they already have, to do that, you know, as well as, I mean, what has been happening in VAM is amazing, considering that's not been funded and resourced fully.
Okay, thank you. But it's clear it can be done. You're doing it. It can be done as long as the appropriate resources are in place. So again, there's maybe something in there to be taken away in other areas to see if that could be replicated in some shape or form. Thanks, Pegs. Louise, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Grant. I suppose kind of building on that point, I just had a question for Chris on that, as our kind of Scottish Government rep, of just, you know, has there been consideration of whether there should be some kind of dedicated funding for kind of capacity building, whether it's in the third sector or whether it sits, you know, no matter where it, I suppose it could, you know, or sits within the kind of TSIs, just so that, you know, I'm interested when you're talking about the national product, and I know there's obviously in the kind of LEP framework there is reference to working with third sector, but I just wondered if there's a way that there could be slightly more of a structure around how LEPs engage with the third sector, because, you know, you mentioned in the presentation, Chris, about trying to simplify the landscape, and I think from what you can see of the conversation we're having here already, you know, for a lot of charities, it's really hard to navigate because you don't quite know who you should be contacting, what forums you should be on. So I guess I was just interested if that might be something that is considered by Scottish Government.
Chris, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, so it hasn't been me directly involved, but there's been a lot of work around strengthening LEPs from the kind of partnership level between Scottish and local government. We've also got third sector representation in some of our kind of more senior governance groups. So the operational group that we host has third sector representation, as well as the joint ministerial group. So I guess what I would say is we're always really keen to hear about what we might look to do to better support that understanding. So I would encourage you to either get in touch directly with me if you want to kind of discuss anything after today's meeting, or feed anything back through the third sector reps on those groups. So I know that Lorna Forrest is really quite a key part in terms of those groups and engaging and actually driving forward the kind of thinking around third sector involvement. So I don't have a direct answer because it isn't me directly involved in it, but always really keen to have some discussions around what we might be looking to do better and how we might be able to improve some of that visibility in terms of who people get in touch with and how they get involved at the local level.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. And I know that, I mean, I sit on the TSEF exec as well. So obviously we are trying as much as possible to represent the sector in all these forums you know, doing sessions like this and as much as we can. I guess it's just that thing of sometimes we are all volunteering over and above day jobs. And I think, you know, sometimes it is about how can we just build in that capacity so that actually we can make sure that it happens. But yeah, be good to get others' views, but thank you.
Thanks, Louise. Thanks, Chris, and thanks for the offer. People will have heard that. So again, even if only as a gateway, Chris could be a point of contact if you want to discuss this issue or take this issue forward. Chris's details, I think, were posted earlier, so please use those. Moving through the questions, very interested to hear more about supplier development from the Renfrewshire example, how this approach could be applied to remote, rural and island-based contractors. So there's a particular take on that. Ruth, I don't know, is there something you could pick up on there?
Yeah, I think there's a SLADE network, which is all the local authorities, and we're talking just now quite regularly about how are we all approaching the changes to No One Left Behind and what's happening there. So I think there is a range of information sharing around what we're all doing. I think there was another comment about the employment grant programme as well, and I know we've shared our grant programme, which we really brought together really quickly just because we felt time was of the essence, and we shared that with all other partners. I don't think you know, the paperwork's all there for anyone actually to look at. So there is certainly, I think, the opportunity, but for anyone on the call, I think even if you want to contact your local employability or your local employability partner lead, and I think Lorna put it in the chat, and even just say you were at this seminar, is there any way you can get involved or you'd like a chat about it? I think all the leads would be quite happy to do that. I know I get lots of inquiries, and you know, some I answer myself, but one of the additional resources we put in was a partnership coordinator, which we were able to do from the recent funds as well. So some places are putting extra staff in just to make sure that there is that ability to bring in new networks and new opportunities for joint working and partnership. So I would just say contact them and say, we heard this at this seminar. Is anything similar we could do here? And I'm sure people will get back to you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm sure the LEP leads will appreciate your offering that up on their behalf. No, seriously, I'm sure they will. So thanks for that. There's actually another question on here that is probably for yourself, Ruth. Is the Contractors Forum you mentioned restricted to only Renfrewshire-based organisations?
No, but what we did was anyone who was at the conference where we talked about it and when it was raised as an issue, everyone there was invited to join it if they were looking at bidding in. And the majority would be Renfrewshire, but not all. And we've got some big national organisations. We also went to all of the employability fund providers as well, whether they were in the area or on the Travel to Train programme too. And anyone else. So it was kind of an open invite that was shared around. So anyone's welcome to come in. And we did get a number of bids from organisations that we've never worked with before that were approved. So no, it was quite open.
Yeah, thank you. While you're there, Ruth, another one. Again, you may have picked up on this already, but Neil has asked this question, that you mentioned using the national framework alongside your grant funded services. Wondered what the rationale would be for using the national framework as well.
Yeah, so we didn't get everything we were looking for basically through the grant programme. We put out a framework that had all the No One Left Behind groups and the various things that we were looking at stage 1, 2, 3, 4 primarily. And we were oversubscribed for some areas and we were well undersubscribed for others. So we're going to use the framework if we need to go back out for certain bits, but we might also look more locally and have a more targeted approach. And it was a real tricky one because, you know, we were kind of warned at the start from our own procurement teams to be careful that this wasn't a procurement process through the back door. So we didn't want to have things that were too prescriptive. You know, it was more of a grant programme than anything else. So I think maybe in our attempt to do that, maybe we haven't been prescriptive enough about saying we would really have liked this. This would be really useful for our area. So that can come through either through a new grant programme or through the framework, but we're kind of leaving our options open so that we can use whatever we think is the best mode of co-commissioning at the time. We're just greedy grant will do anything.
You know, I'm certainly not going to criticise you for that. There's actually a question just further down. It's more a comment. Maybe I may be wrong, but I'm concerned we may need greater consistency across local authorities as to when it's appropriate to use grants versus contracts for provision. And I think that's maybe just picked up on what you said there, that there's not one size fits all. It's about using the most appropriate method at the time to commission the service that's required.
Yeah, it is. But the other thing, if I could come in that, we probably wouldn't have looked at that had we not thought that everything is running too late for us to get the contracts out in time. So I think if, you know, a number of the local authorities and the LEPs are looking at this, and it's really a means to an end. It's about saying, if we want things in place at the right point in time, this might be quicker. And we did it from an absolute zero start of agreeing at the LEP that it might be useful to having it in place within seven weeks, with everything written, going to board approval, etc. So it can be a much quicker process than going through procurement. So it might be useful for some elements for LEPs to be using, as well as the procurement process.
Because the time was always tight on this programme, but it's actually getting tighter now. You know, a couple of weeks' time we're into next year, aren't we? So yeah, absolutely. Okay, thanks for that, Ruth. Question for Grant. It's not actually, it's a question for Chris from Marion. Is there a danger that an approach which is solely based on a personalised individual model may lose the sight of the structural inequalities which affect particular groups? No matter where they live, single parents face the same challenge of being sole carers and breadwinners, and the same structural barriers require a single parent's tailored response across Scotland. And that's from Marion Davis. Thanks, Marion. Chris, do you have a view on that?
Yeah, so I suppose there's a couple of things I want to pick up through that. So when we talk about a kind of personalised approach, it's not necessarily that the provision is completely different for absolutely every individual. It's about listening to that person and their needs and tailoring support accordingly. So I think the point Marion made around some of the structural barriers that are common, that's not something that's going to, at least in the intention of the likes of the Scottish approach to service design, that's not something that's going to get lost as a result of the move towards that. I suppose where we see the opportunities for that kind of Scottish approach to service design and the kind of user-centred approach is that the support needed to help tackle some of those structural barriers will be accompanied by support tailored to that individual. So whether they, whether they're a single parent and face those structural barriers, there may be a number of other barriers to employment that person faces that wouldn't be picked up through provision tailored specifically towards parents. But that's not to say that it's a kind of really simple process or a set process for everyone. It's one of the main reasons that we're looking at the Scottish approach to service design. It's about getting the right support for that person at the right time. But Marion, I know that you've been involved with a lot of colleagues across Scottish Government around the child poverty work. So again, I'm really happy to pick up a conversation with you if you do see any particular risks or that if there's anything that's worrying you. I'm really happy to have a chat and work through some of that.
Thanks, Chris. There's a couple more here actually that would probably end up coming your direction, so I'll just pick up on those now if that's okay. There's a discussion, I think, also for Chris about consistency of approach to volunteering and TSI volunteer centre support and development services. Is that really for you?
So I guess I'm definitely happy to again pick up a chat with David if you think there's something there for Scottish Government. what I would say is for anything in terms of provision or support, I would suggest following the link to the local employability lead. So, you know, the part of the move towards the no one left behind approach is that Scottish Government aren't taking decisions on what provision and support should look like. It's about ensuring that there's local flexibility to do that. So I would suggest that in the first instance, at least, that may be a local employability lead discussion. What I can say from the national level is the importance of volunteering is definitely being considered. You know, this isn't about trying to kind of move away from taking decisions around what progression might look like or what an outcome might look like. Volunteering is really critical to that, and we know that from evidence presented by the sector, discussions we've had with providers, and discussions we've had directly with users as well. So although I probably can't answer that question explicitly, volunteering is definitely a really important part of our consideration at the national level.
As it has to be, yeah, absolutely. Okay, thanks for that. One final one, I think, for you here, Chris. Has Scottish Government done any robust analysis about the quality and impact of local government, about third sector involvement? Are you aware of anything that's gone on, maybe not yourself, but elsewhere across government?
Yeah, so there was a huge amount of activity in the summer around kind of strengthening local employability partnerships and trying to understand essentially where they were at in terms of readiness to move to no one left behind phase 2. I don't have the figures in front of me, but there was a specific question around third sector involvement, and I dare say that since that was carried out in the summer, there has been a lot of progress in particular areas. What I would say is, in terms of the robustness, no one left behind, as you would expect.
Gremlins are still with us, I think. Yeah, we dropped off, Chris. Yeah, can you hear us, Chris? We've lost your audio there.
Oh, I think I fell off the call for a second. Am I back?
You're back. You're here. Yeah.
Hi. So I'm not really sure where I fell off there, but no one left behind will be subject to independent evaluation. So that won't just be kind of self-assessment and kind of data and narrative reports. That will be an independent evaluation of the approach as well. That's currently being scoped out by analyst colleagues, but you know, that's subject to rather robust rules around independence and evaluation. So that's not going to be. I can see that Beverly's popped a comment in the chat saying the concerns the evaluation will be local authorities themselves, but it will be independent of both Scottish Government, local government and providers to ensure that actually it does have that robustness. That's good.
That's good. So objectivity is good. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thanks for that. Question from Alec. Not sure who can best answer this. However, will the end of SDS Employability Fund in March next year lead to a gap in provision? I think there's an obvious answer to that, unfortunately. But maybe one for yourself, Ruth, to pick up on. You know, obviously moving from sort of national contracts to local. I mean, is this something that you have in mind when you're looking at what the requirement is locally?
Yeah,
there will be a gap, obviously, caused by the cessation of those national programmes. Is this something you factored in?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, that was our concern, was that by the time we would procure, there would be a gap, which is why we went with the Employability Grant Programme. I think the interesting thing, though, is that, you know, what will each LEP want to put provision-wise in their area? So a lot of the previous provision might be deemed not as important, not as urgent, not as required now. And I think because of the raft of different funds that are coming through, I think if we had, for example, in our area, if we had kept EF for another year, we would have been trying to remove almost all provision for youth, because we're awash with money for young people and provision that's not getting taken up. And in our area, we're back to pre-COVID, the highest employment levels ever. So we just don't have people, you know, looking for that type of provision. So I think the key thing about next year is really about the demand statements that all of the LEPs are working through just now and what is actually required in the area, and that those are fulfilled to make sure that there isn't a gap, and whether for some elements, you know, you could afford for them to drop off because they're not as required. And I think we're in the position just now where anyone who wants to work can work at the moment, where we have more jobs than people looking for work. So the provision in the future, in my own opinion, is very much about no one left behind. You know, it's about the hardest to reach in the journey that they go on to get into work. So some of the EF provision may not have been required. So I think it'll be different in the different areas, Grant, but we were worried about a drop-off and we have put provision in place so that it's ready to start. But I think it will be different in different areas.
Can I, just as a supplementary there, Ruth, can I just check, is that the sort of issue that was raised through your forum, through the Providers Forum? Were these concerns being raised, and obviously you've explored them and are satisfied that it's maybe not the issue it could otherwise have been, but were these representations made to you?
Yeah, we actually raised ourselves at the conference. We knew it was going to be an issue, and you know, all of the, whether you're a private or third sector partner or a public partner, you're all partners in our area. So we I guess we're quite brave, because I think at the time there was a lot of, oh, you don't want to talk about it and upset folk, and we just kind of said, look, there's going to be an issue. What do you think? What's your, you know, where are your concerns, and let us try and address them as much as we can do locally. And we did get a lot of feedback, and that's why we had the Contractor Forum where people could express their difficulties. And for example, some organisations, some big training providers didn't bid in because they were quite honest and said, look, we would bid for you if we knew what we were getting from other areas, but we don't. And yours is a small part of a much bigger contract. We can't afford to run what you need at that scale because it's only a part of what we do. We'll need to wait till next year. We can't bid into you just now because we just don't think it's sensible when we don't know what else we've got. So we weren't able to meet every partner's need, and we weren't able to fulfill all of the parts of the work that we were looking to fulfill, but we'll just have to move that forward. I think we're probably 70% there, and we'll move the rest forward as the time moves on and hope to get it in place.
Okay, lovely, thank you. We're conscious of time here, maybe time for one. I mean, obviously we missed out on Zoe's input. I don't know whether you're back with us or not, Zoe, but there's a question here that would ordinarily have come in your direction. Is there an indication of the timeline when Scotland Excel procurement and individual local procurement will commence? Are you with us, Zoe?
Hi, apologies for that, Grant. I am back, but it seems to be quite intermittent, so I'll try and answer that one quickly. So in terms of Scotland Excel process, it will be January next year, so January 2022. If you've seen the prior information notice, you'll have seen that on PCS, and any contract notice would also be published there.
Okay, we're sort of out of time for questions, but I mean that was quite a good run through. It was quite a varied batch of questions. I mean, I think I said at the outset, this is the start of a conversation. This isn't going to start and end here today. We need to keep this conversation going. So our speakers today have provided their contact details, and I'm sure they won't mind if you want to get in touch direct with any specific questions you have. Obviously, as I said, we were unfortunate losing Zoe's input there, but the slides will be available and circulated after the event here. So small consolation, I know, but at least you might get the gist of what Zoe would otherwise have covered. I'm just conscious with time here that maybe just sort of next steps, what happens now. I suppose depending on the interest levels, we will look at a follow-up session to look at how we can best continue, we as the TSEF executive can best continue to support you and your organisations, and importantly, the resources available to provide this. So please do get in touch. Let us know through email or through Basecamp how you found today. Was it of use? Are there other areas you would like us to explore further on your behalf and bring back to you in an appropriate way? because, as I say, it's your forum, so we are keen to respond to the need that exists. Final reflections on today, really interesting, informative. Hopefully you've found it to have been the same. I think what today's shown us, if we didn't know already, is it can be a complicated business, but it's also shown us there's not one size that fits all here. With 32 LEPs, there are likely to be 32 different routes to delivery, albeit working within a common framework. Arguably, that's okay, that's right and proper, because if that's the case, it shows that local need is being met. It shows there's a desire to do the best we can do by those individuals and those communities that are relying on the types of supports that our organisations provide for them, whether it be in terms of policy, governance or delivery. There's so much more we can achieve if we're all doing it together, all bringing our various contributions to the table. So, I mean, getting back to the situation pre-COVID is not the goal. That should not be the end result. As we all on the webinar today will know, it's about being better than that. It's about taking the opportunity to look at how we include well-being, how we can achieve broader societal improvements as restrictions ease further, the economy continues its recovery. So no one left behind, lots of moving parts. In addition, unfortunately, the pandemic doesn't seem to be quite finished with us yet. So it's always going to be difficult to pitch interventions or responses with absolute confidence without knowing exactly where the moving parts will stop. And I think the next year will continue to be a challenge in terms of some of the pressures the introduction of a new system will undoubtedly bring as it beds in. And I think we just have to take that as a natural part of next year. And if necessary, the year after that, simply be ready to flex our business models if we need to. And, you know, I have to say, we have all been incredibly effective at doing that to date. So I'm sure that working together at a national and increasingly importantly at a local level, I for one remain confident individually and collectively that we'll be well placed to meet the challenges that lie ahead. So with that, just a reminder that the recording of today's session will be available online through the SCVO website. Slides will be posted. So finally, I'd just like to offer a big thank you to all our speakers who came along to share their expertise today, and to you all for attending and for participating in your own way. So thanks to one and all. And with that, I'll bring proceedings to a close. Thank you.